Hey guys, welcome to the channel. I'm Matt, and we're here to talk about the Miami Dolphins 2024 draft. Now, the Miami Dolphins did a very interesting thing with the 21st overall pick, and that is select Chop Robinson of Penn State, edge defender, who has very elite athletic traits that they hope can translate to the NFL. And for the Dolphins, it's a strategic move to draft an edge player because they have two players in Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips who's going to be out early in the season, perhaps on the PUP list while they're recovering from serious injuries. Jalen Phillips suffered an Achilles tear against the Jets last season, and Bradley Chubb, I think, suffered an ACL injury against the Baltimore Ravens later in the season. So those guys are not likely to start out the season in September 100%. So having a guy like Chop Robinson who can team up with Shaq Barrett, who was signed from the Tampa Bay Bucks as an edge defender, maybe those two guys can pick up some of the slack that's been left after Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips is going to be out early on in the season. And that's a good thing because the Dolphins need as much help as they can get. As a matter of fact, they had so many injuries last season to Andrew Van Ginkel, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, that they had to actually sign guys off the street to come in and play defensive end against the Chiefs in a playoff game on the road. They had to sign guys like Melvin Ingram and Bruce Irvin. And those guys, great players in their days, but in 2023, they weren't really able to help this franchise win a playoff game on the road. The Dolphins selected Chop Robinson. I think it's a good pick. I would have preferred them to draft Xavier Worthy because I thought that they can add to their speed on offense and stretch the field and be able to put defenses in very compromising positions by having both Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle on the field on opposite ends. Then you stick Xavier Worthy into that mix. You have Devon Achane, you have Jonnu Smith, you have Rasheem Mostert. So you have a lot of guys that can really threaten the defense in the perimeters, down the field, deep in the slot. So I thought that Xavier Worthy would be a way to have the Dolphins continue to have a lineage of sorts when it comes to speed on the outside. But they decided to get an impactful edge rusher who's been profiled by many, including Lance Zierlein, NFL.com draft analyst, who says that he profiles to be a bit like Micah Parsons. So if the Dolphins are getting a guy with that kind of upside, that kind of potential at the 21st overall pick, then I think it's a draft pick that is going to bear fruit into the future. So as we continue to talk about the pick, let's see what Mike McDaniel and Chris Grier had to say about their new 2024 first round pick.
There's a lot of compounding variables to a sack, whether a quarterback sees it, holds on to it or not. But disrupting the passer and taking the rhythm off the pass game, that that's a stat for him, but it's also for teammates, and production comes off that too. So it's exciting to not have to block him.
Mine for me would be Danielle Hunter. Had 4 career sacks coming out of college, and he's been a really good player in this league. Not putting that pressure on him to be Danielle Hunter, but there's not just him. There's other players throughout the league. If you go look at what their college numbers are compared to how they've had success in the pros, and we think a lot of his traits and the things you see on film translate.
What I found interesting about what Chris Grier had to say about the draft pick is that he wasn't too concerned about college production. Rather, he was more concerned about how his skill sets and his measurables and his traits was going to translate into the NFL game. As a matter of fact, Chris Grier said that with his explosiveness off the ball and his ability to bend, he felt as though he can affect the quarterback by being disruptive and generating pressures, and that would be the key for him to get playing time on the NFL level.
Explosion, his ability to bend and do stuff. So I think, he's done a lot of good things in college, and we think with our coaching staff and what we're doing and his work ethic and how it is, we think he can even take it another level. So we're very excited to add him.
It's been reported that Chop Robinson compares very, very favorably to Micah Parsons, all-pro defensive end for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Micah Parsons ran a 4.39 in the 40 when he was drafted in 2021, while Chop Robinson ran a 4.48 in the 40. So there's a significant difference in speed overall. But when you watch the tape, you watch Chop Robinson's play speed, it compares very favorably to how Micah Parsons play currently in the NFL. And I think that's interesting, the comparison, because when the Dolphins had an opportunity to draft Micah Parsons in 2021, they had the third overall pick in the draft thanks to the Houston Texans as part of the Laramie Tunzel trade, and they were able to trade down with the 49ers and pick up two first round picks. And at 12, if they had stayed, perhaps they could have drafted Micah Parsons. Instead, they decided to trade back up into the sixth spot using one of those first round picks they acquired from San Francisco and selecting Jaylen Waddle. At the time, I was a little bit mixed about the pick. I thought Jaylen Waddle had been injured in college, and I thought he was more of a special teams and slot guy, and he wouldn't really be able to be a number one or number two wide receiver in the NFL. So while I appreciated his speed, I didn't think that he'd be as productive as he has been in the NFL. But thankfully, he's proven me wrong, and he's proven that he could be, at the very least, a very capable number two receiver with the possibility of being kind of like a 1B receiver, which he is right now with Tyreek Hill on the squad. So the Dolphins passed on the opportunity to take Micah Parsons in 2021. Maybe they have an opportunity to get a player who profiles similarly to Micah Parsons, and they could make up for that lost pick. Chop Robinson was the fourth edge player taken in the 2024 NFL draft. As a matter of fact, he was drafted after Latu from UCLA, Turner from Alabama, and Verse from Florida State. So those three players went before him at the edge position. And normally, when you get the fourth best player in any position in the NFL draft, it's a little bit worrisome because you think that maybe there were other people that were drafted higher that were more talented. But because of Chop Robinson's raw ability and his elite athletic metrics, he has a chance to perhaps exceed his expectations and have a more productive career than maybe some of the guys that were drafted ahead of him. So we look forward to seeing how Chop Robinson can develop those athletic skills into production on the NFL level. Now, Graham Barton is one of those guys that were drafted after Chop Robinson, who a lot of people felt that the Dolphins should end up drafting, and he seemed like he had the talent to be a All-Pro center in the NFL, and he had the versatility to be able to play on either interior guard positions. There's some who even felt that he can even play at the tackle positions, although Mel Kiper refuted that during the ESPN broadcast, saying that because of the length of his arms, he might struggle playing on the outside. But that was a player that some Dolphin fans and some Dolphin beat reporters wanted the Dolphins to take at number 21. And the Dolphins typically don't really take, at least since Chris Grier has been the general manager, he usually takes premium positions in the first round. So you would expect him to take either a quarterback, which he did with Tua, obviously, but guys like Jaylen Waddle, wide receivers, guys like cornerbacks like Noah Buganagi, um, left tackles like Austin Jackson, or edge players like Jalen Phillips and now Chop Robinson. Those are typically the guys that Chris Grier targets in the first round of drafts. So it's not very surprising to see him go after Chop Robinson, um, even though some fans probably felt that the Dolphins could use some offensive line help. And it's true, they probably could. But the draft is not over. Free agency is not over, like Chris Grier said. So it's an opportunity to try to shore up those positions later on in the offseason or even later on in this draft. Chop Robinson was described as being a boom or bust player in the NFL draft, which means that, he can either bust like Deion Jordan or he could become a star like Micah Parsons or anything in between. So the Dolphins, I think they knew that going into the pick. They really liked his athletic traits. They really liked his ability to get off the snap and his ability to turn the corner, get around the edge, and put pressure on the quarterback, disrupt the offensive system. So I think they're willing to take a risk on elite traits and elite ability, even if he didn't have elite production. And the Dolphins would have to reconcile with that in the upcoming years. But I think that it's a very favorable pick, unlike the Charles Harris pick and the Deion Jordan pick in prior drafts. This kid has a lot of ability. He has, as far as has been reported, he has no character issues. As a matter of fact, he's a very well liked young man. People talk very highly of him, including his coaches and other people around him. But if you're a Dolphins fan, you always fear that, he might end up being another Channing Tindall who just hasn't, as of yet, been able to make an impact on the field. So hopefully the Dolphins drafted a gem that can help them in the upcoming season and beyond. So that's it for day one of the Miami Dolphins 2024 draft. We will also tackle the second round pick that the Dolphins have, I think number 53 overall, or 55 overall in the NFL draft. So we'll figure out if the Dolphins maintain that pick or decide to trade down and collect more picks. Either way, I'll be coming out with a video talking about the Dolphins day two of the 2024 draft and later on day three. If you like this content, please subscribe to the channel, hit the likes, leave a comment. I'll try to comment on all the comments that come up in the video. And we try to keep this rolling throughout not just the draft season, but also into training camp and the preseason.